Mr. Rowe.
Just one thing, what I'd like to do is before we get that far, because one of the problems we run into is that, you know, you spend so much now, so, you know, like the big dig, you know, just keeps going and going and going. I'd like to get those insurances in writing before, in fact, we enter into it, before we go through all the process, we go, you know, half the stuff we spent already. I mean, I'd rather lose 100,000 than turn around and find out at the end of the project we're gonna lose 500,000.
What I'm saying to you is that if we stop the process to try to, through right now a political means, to get something back from Mass Highway, with that effort, this project is going to be on hold. And if it goes to September 30th, we're off the tip and we're subject to anything new, including if this regulation of Bill, this policy that Bill's talking about, evolves. Now we may be subject to that next year. The risk is too great. For the amount of money, what was the amount of money for the eminent domain acquisitions? 40,000 on a project that we've spent about 600,000 to date on between engineering, right-of-way acquisitions. My advice to you is sign the right-of-way certificates, fulfill 100% of our obligations of this project to the state, and then we will have an agreement on or about or somewhere between the advertising date and the award of the bid.
Will be before the bid.
Before the bid.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Murphy.
Translate it a different way. So we do this, we get the agreement. What Mr. Smith is referring to is not going to be a surprise in the agreement. That's what you're telling us. That
What was that again, John?
When we do these takings, move through the process, when we get the agreement, what Mr. Smith is referring to is not going to be some surprise that's in the agreement to us. You said that the state is already...
We don't expect that agreement to be in our document. That agreement that Bill is referring to.
That's
We don't.
that language, right?
That language.
Right, that's not going to be a surprise in the agreement that we see.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Younger, you over there?
The only, Mr. Hanlon, even if this was agreed upon, let's say they made it effective to this particular project, couldn't you reduce some of the scope of the projects to make it fit within that 5.5 figure?
Oh, if we had to. It's always a backup plan.
Well, I guess I would like to comment. I would like to urge the board members to go forward with this. It's been 6 years? 7 years in the
7 years
making.
this
And
month.
I do understand what Mr. Hanlon is saying, and I do believe what Mr. Hanlon says about we are not part of that, because that is also the way I read this article. It was future
And it's a proposal.
and it's only a proposal. I think it'll be a definite improvement for the town and also for the residents of the town also. Having said that, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to sign the order of taking for permanent drainage easements at the following locations. 122 Park Street. Need the names read into the record. Michael A. Beans and Paula A. Beans. 239 Park Street, Robert R. Harold. 2 Aldersgate Way, Margaret D. Gadigan. 200 Park Street, M.P. Phillips and J.P. Dimitri, trustees of Contemporary Realty Trust. 14 Washington Street, Ralph J. Sweetland Jr. and Priscilla S. Sweetland. 108 Elm Street, Mary Ann Simino and Sandra J. Smith. 106 Elm Street, Anthony J. Spina and Kelly A. Spina. 118 Park Street, Estradios Lycos.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I apologize if I messed up anybody's
No
name as I
problem,
read it.
Mr. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed. And 1 abstention. 3-1-1.
Mr. Chairman, I move to sign the order of taking for permanent wall easements at the following locations. 7 Winter Street, William A. Stewart and Donna N. Stewart. 15 Winter Street, Sean Fair, formerly Alfred, and Eva M. Cotis. 36 Winter Street, Bruce E. Rhodes. 25 Winter Street, Bruce Durning. 27 Winter Street, Gloria A. Duplissa, trustee of the Duplissa Nominee Trust. 241 Elm Street, Arthur J. Murray Jr. and Barbara M. Lopez. 123 Elm Street, Henry and Jackie Tatali. 107 Elm Street, James Bourne. 2 Riverside Drive, Sylvian Gladeau. 1 Childs Road, David F. Bornstein. 181 Elm Street, Carl A. Bigham Jr. and Helen Bigham. 117 Elm Street, David R. Sidalou and Jean A. Sidalou. 2 McIntyre, Paul J. Sherba and Jeffrey Scholes. 245 Elm Street, Peter F. DeMeo and Gabriella DeMeo. 237 Elm Street, Frank A. DeMeo and Julie E. Lacoste. 238 Park Street, Paul O'Leary. 259 Park Street, Nelson Harris and Doris Harris.
Motion made, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Abstained. 311. So we have
I think that's it.
Mr. Chair, you're back on judge.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair, did an excellent job.
First time.
Mr. Chairman, I just would like to make for the record that I think it's going to be good for Route 62, but I'm just a little disappointed in the state's attitude that they're not concerned about a couple of real safety issues. They seem to just kind of like stuff them off that, you know, they can't be bothered with it, and that's what bothers me.
We have scheduled this time to meet with Mr. Richard Higston, I think, from Trustee Higston. Will
Thank you, gentlemen.
discuss the town audit. How are you tonight?
Good, how you doing?
Fine, thank you. I don't know if you want to...
Split up somewhere?
Yeah, slide around.
Does everyone have an audit report? Because I just had a page I was going to refer to it. I'm going to refer to a page, so I just want to make sure you have
Should we have,
Can I just look
Sure.
at one for the
Yeah, no, you can have it.
back? Okay.
You can have that.
How are you doing today?
I don't know if you've met the 2 new members of the board, Mr. Muldoon and Mr. Murphy. This is Mr. Higston, outside auditing firm. Comes before us annually to give us a state of affairs here.
If nobody has any questions, I'll start with the management letter. Each year, the town authorizes bonding for a variety of purposes. In order to finance projects until the bond happens, they use short-term instruments called bond anticipation notes, or BANs. Generally, BANs structured so that it matures once a year or when the bond is issued. If the bond issuance is delayed, then it'll have to be rolled over or reissued. And that's what happened to the town in this instance. The bond was planned to mature once, and what was it, 6 or 8 months later, it had to be rolled over to a show. The little school, yeah. So that the funding, the short-term interest had to be paid twice. The fiscal 2000 budget process only included enough funding for it to mature once, so there was a $49,000 deficit. Excuse me. So what I recommended is that the town do something to provide a funding source to eliminate the overdrawn appropriation, either free cash or raise it on a recap. I believe that they raised it on the 2001 recap. But I think that, more importantly, in the future, I think it's a good idea to either try to get a reserve fund transfer or address it at the annual town meeting in May, so that at the end of the year it doesn't show up with a deficit. It's, Moody's really doesn't like to see deficits in appropriations at year end, and I think that you could have addressed it through free cash or some other means at the annual town meeting.
And what was the, from your standpoint, the rationale behind the necessity to roll?
Well, it was supposed to mature. Usually, you do a bond and a bond anticipation note, and you expect the bond to be issued in, say, August, and so you do a 1-year bond anticipation note. But either the town's not ready, or the bank's not ready, or your financial advisor tells you that the rates aren't great, and that it's better off to wait for 6 months or 3 months and to reissue the bond, to issue the bond later. So you should reissue the bond anticipation note. So that's what one of those things happened with this bond, and there wasn't enough funding in the short-term interest account to pay for the extra 6 months of short-term interest.
Okay. I don't know how you want to handle it, but I mean, if we have a question on that, we could just ask George. Joe, as far as this particular case, what was the set of circumstances that required it to be rolled over again?
It was a case where we just didn't pick up on when the maturity of the ban was. You know, we normally would, because of the way the SBA reimbursement is, we put it out a year. For some reason, we put it out for 6 months. When 6 months came, you know, the little school, they still weren't ready, so we had to do it again. Because there's up to a 5-year wait on reimbursement.
So this was an additional $49,000 incurred as a result. Now, and we did it for 6 months instead of a year? Is that what you said?
We did it for 6 months, we really should have done it for a year. But because of the timing of when the reimbursement was going to start, we weren't sure.
I wouldn't say that it was cost you an extra $49,000. I just think that it was a budgeting thing. You were going to have it issued for that long, because when you issued it for 6 months, it should have been issued for a year initially. But when you knew it was only issued for 6 months, you budgeted for 6 months. The budget should have included and budgeted for 12 months worth of short-term interest. So I wouldn't say that it cost you, cost you $49,000 more for the budget. I think it's more of a budgeting thing at the initial stage of the process.
Although if we had budgeted, if we had put it out for a year,
it would have cost you the same.
Would it cost the same?
Yeah,
or
it's
would
the same. No, it's relatively the same for the short-term instruments, not less than a year. The next issue is deals with estimated receipts. For budgetary purposes and preparing the recap sheet, the town estimates certain revenues, such as licenses and permits, excise penalties and interest, charges for services, and others. As the estimates increase, the ability to appropriate and stay within Prop 2.5 increases also. However, when the revenue estimates get pushed too high, the amount of free cash that is generated can be significantly reduced. In fiscal year 2000, several categories of revenues didn't meet their budget, and that's the page I gave you, page 7. It shows penalty and interest was short by about $20,000, license and permit was short, charges for services, and earnings on investments. So I'm just recommending that you try to remain conservative when you're doing your revenue projections. That has to be tempered or balanced with the need to increase and to meet necessary appropriations. But it's just a good policy to try to be as conservative as possible. What happens on page 7, the variance column, is what generates your free cash each year. I'd just like to take a minute to kind of explain how the budgeting process works. If you had a budget of revenues of $30 million and appropriations of $30 million, and you actually spent your $30 million, but you took in 31, the free cash that you generated that year is $1 million. In the next year, if you said, oh, I have $31 million, well, I'm going to appropriate that much, and you got your $31 million in and you spent your $31 million, well, you didn't generate any free cash that year. So the way you generate free cash is being conservative in your revenue estimates. As budgets get tighter, there's not as much turnback of appropriations, and that generates free cash too.